As you know, I had dengue earlier last month, and I was on my back for 2 to 3 weeks. Today is about day 24 since I had dengue. I'm feeling a lot better. Thank you for all your concerns. And today I want to talk to you about emergency healthcare services, ambulance response times, how to find doctors and hospitals in the Philippines, and medical insurance. We ran a survey on our community page, and we were really surprised to see that 55% of the people were most concerned about emergency accidents and ambulance response time. And stick around, we're going to talk about the typical response times in major cities in the United States and compare them to the Philippines. Your second biggest concern, at 25%, was finding access to good doctors. And we're going to talk about some strategies and to find good doctors and where you can find the best hospitals in the Philippines. We're going to give you that. Third, just behind, a few points behind, medical insurance, access to good medical insurance. What does it cost? What does it cover? Very surprisingly, only 3% were interested in the cost of medical procedures and dental procedures. And so we're going to just touch on that very briefly. Chrissy will be back next week. I'm here alone solo. Stay tuned. It's all about being prepared to make your best life in the Philippines. Emergency medical situations, how you deal with them. Ambulance response times when it comes to where you're going to retire and where you're going to live. This is really important. How to find a good doctor, private, public, PhilHealth, insurance, what it costs. I'll give you my insurance agent's number in this video so you can contact him if you're interested. And then I have in the book, Fly Me to the Philippines, A Modern Man's Guide to Living, Traveling, and Finding Love in the Philippines, a lot of the information we're going to talk about today, and that's available on Amazon for just $9.99 for a free download. Although most people are buying the paperback to travel and bring it to the Philippines, it's actually on the bestseller list just ahead of the Lonely Planet Philippines Guide. So here we go. You were most concerned about emergency healthcare and response times. And in the book, I have a section on the typical response times in the Philippines. But let's get into it. Let's get granular. Let's talk about this. In some major U.S. cities, response times are as low as 8 or 9 minutes. You are just not going to find that here in the Philippines. And where I live in Cagayan de Oro, the response times are about 35 minutes. And we're going to talk about that some more. So let's get serious about your number one healthcare issue. If you get in an accident or if you need an emergency ambulance, what is the situation going to look like, and how can that impact your decision about where to live and spend time in the Philippines? The reality is that emergency services in the Philippines vary dramatically depending on your location. According to my research, the average amount of ambulance response time in the Philippines ranges from 15 to 30 minutes in urban areas, which falls far below the average international standards. To put this in perspective, let me compare response times in the Philippines to major cities in the United States. Manila, Makati, BGC, 15 to 20 minutes, best in the country. Cebu City, 20 to 30 minutes. Davao City, 20 to 25 minutes, slightly better due to less traffic. Dumaguete, 25 to 35 minutes. Baguio, 25 to 35 minutes. And again, as I said here in Cagayan de Oro, it's approximately 35 minutes. Let's take a look at some major U.S. cities for comparison. New York City, currently averaging around 9 to 10 minutes. Chicago has a target of 6 minutes, though a 2023 report showed 19% of responses took more than 6 minutes. That's pretty strong. Los Angeles, 7 to 8 minutes in urban areas. Miami, 7 to 9 minutes. Boston, Massachusetts, only 6 to 8 minutes. So this is really important, and it concerns a lot of you. Even if you're in Metro Manila or Cebu City or Davao or in Dumaguete, you are going to see a response time of roughly 25 to 30 minutes. And remember, we have a golden hour. And not only do they have to get you to the hospital, but when you arrive, there have to be competent and available doctors to work on you in that golden hour. So let's talk about why there's such a huge discrepancy between response times in the West and here in the Philippines. And number one is traffic. You know, anywhere you go in the Philippines, the towns kind of look alike. There are a few towns that are extraordinarily clean and organized. Iloilo has great infrastructure. Baguio has better than average infrastructure. Makati, BGC, very good infrastructure. You don't see trikes on the street. You don't see vendors in the right-hand lane setting up shop and putting out tires to block traffic. But in most of the Philippines, you see sari-sari stores butting out into traffic. You see people parked in the right-hand lane. Traffic, even in small towns, can be very intense. Now, as a retiree, we don't really worry about it too much because we can pick and choose, and we're not likely to go out at 7:30 and run into private school traffic or be on the road at 5:30, 6 p.m. and hit rush hour traffic. But when it comes to a medical emergency, you really can't pick your time, and traffic congestion is the number one reason you're going to have difficulty. And sometimes we see ambulances and there's so much traffic and the ambulance just can't really get through the traffic. There's nowhere for the cars to get out of the way. So that's going to be the biggest problem. Number two, there's a limit to the amount of ambulances available and the services and how they're all organized. Individual barangays, individual city. Sometimes having a neighbor, a driver who can get you in a car and get you down the road towards the hospital could be your best choice. And also a private hospital will sometimes have its own ambulance service. So for example, here in Cagayan de Oro, we have St. Francis, which is a brand new private hospital. It's only 3 kilometers away. And there would be about a 1 kilometer of heavy traffic most times of the day to get that last mile. But it's only 3 kilometers, and in an emergency, we might just jump in the truck, jump in a car, and try and make it there ourselves. However, we can call and get a number from them if they have a private ambulance service. That would be one of the recommended strategies. It's sort of a decentralized system. You know, each barangay, each hospital can have its own ambulance service. And especially when you get out into the provinces, you know, if that ambulance has already been called out, or if there's a major fire or there's an accident, these ambulances might be occupied and you could wait a very long time for an ambulance to reach you. Now, here's what you need to know for emergency situations if you're planning to live in the Philippines. This is real practical information. And I highly recommend you take note of this and put it to use when you come here so that, God forbid, you have a situation that arises, you fall off a ladder, you have a little problem, you can get the best care possible. If you already have a known medical condition, I highly recommend you take into account where the best medical facilities are. And in chapter 12 of the book, I outlined the best medical facilities in the Philippines. But you really need to think about living in Makati, Manila, BGC, Cebu City, Davao, possibly Dumaguete near Sil, which is a small town with a medical teaching hospital. But being near a first-class medical facility might be very important to you. Now, you can always jump on the plane and go see a doctor in an hour flight in Manila or Cebu City. So getting to the major hospital centers is really only a flight away. As I mentioned before, many of the major private hospitals will have their own private ambulance services. Contact the major private hospital nearby. Learn if they have a private ambulance service. Get that phone number, put it on the refrigerator. If you don't have a car of your own, but you have a neighbor with an SUV, you have a neighbor in your guard-gated community, somebody in the condo, find some alternative transportation, either a Grab that can come get you right away, or hail a taxi, or find a neighbor. Filipinos will show up in droves if there's an emergency, if you have an accident, if there's a medical situation. Filipinos are the most helpful people possible, but it can be difficult to get to a hospital in a private car with traffic. But it can be one of your better options is to have somebody who can get you in a vehicle and out the door. Now, it's a good idea to carry a medical ID card. As you know, I tell you, I have a magnetic wallet on my iPhone. In it, I carry my Pacific Cross Peso Plan medical insurance, my driver's license, and one Charles Schwab debit card. That's how I leave the house. Occasionally, I'll bring my passport with me or some of my other credit cards. So it's a a good idea to have your medical insurance with you. If you have a special blood type, just have that in your information. Have your Filipina, your wife, your girlfriend, the person you usually play golf with, maybe have that information. Send them an email, and God forbid they'll have access to that information. Okay, now let's switch to your second biggest concern, finding access to trusted doctors. How do you find good doctors? Where are the good doctors in the good hospitals? Chapter 15 of the book and addendum 10 goes into this in some detail. This was 25% of you answered your number one concern. The Philippines has a mix of public and private hospitals with a significant quality gap between them. For expats, I generally recommend private hospitals, which offer standards closer to Western expectations. The top hospitals by city in the Philippines: in Manila, St. Luke's Medical Center, BGC in Quezon City, widely regarded as the best medical facility in the Philippines. Second, Makati Medical Center. Third, the Medical City. And fourth, Manila Hospital. In Cebu City, Chonghua Hospital, Cebu Doctors University Hospital, Perpetual Succor Hospital. And Davao and Cebu City are tied for the second biggest metro areas, roughly 2.3 million. Davao doesn't have as much traffic as Cebu City. Davao Doctors Hospital and Southern Philippines Medical Center. Now, Dumaguete is a very small city you've all heard about. There's a ton of vloggers there. It has a boulevard or a boardwalk, which a lot of Westerners are appealed to. There's no beach there, but there are beaches 20 minutes away in Dawan. And there's cool weather up in the hills of Valencia, which draws a lot of expats. And there's a teaching hospital there called Silman University Medical. And so there is access to better than average medical. It's not like the big city in Manila or Cebu or Davao, but for a small 100,000 person town, it's got access to Silman and Holy Child Hospital. Now, Baguio is a town of 400,000 people. It's where the wealthy have their summer homes. And in Baguio, you can find Baguio General Hospital and Notre Dame de Chartres Hospital. What makes these hospitals trusted? They have internationally trained doctors, modern equipment, English-speaking staff, and accreditations from international organizations. A lot of you are really concerned about how to find a trusted doctor, and let me give you my strategies on that. Expat referrals. Join Facebook groups for expats in your area and ask for recommendations. This is often the most reliable method. Hospital websites. Top hospitals list their doctors with credentials and specialties. HMOs, or health management organizations. If you join a local HMO like MaxiCare or Medicard, they'll provide lists of accredited doctors. Consultation approach. In the Philippines, it's acceptable to have an initial consultation with multiple doctors to find one you're comfortable with. Check credentials. Look for doctors who trained or had fellowships internationally, particularly in the US, Australia, or Singapore. A tip I share in my book: when you find a good doctor, get their personal private phone number so that you can consult with them during an emergency. Maybe they can get a head start and meet you at the hospital. Here in the Philippines, it's not that unusual for a doctor to allow you to have their contact information and call them if there's an emergency. This is a good leg up to give you better than average medical care no matter where you are in the country. So remember, many doctors will give you their mobile number for emergency concerns. Don't be shy. So your third most important concern, 19%, was healthcare insurance and what it covers. Now, here in the Philippines, there's something called PhilHealth, and it's available to expats as well as Filipinos, but it only covers hospitalization, and it's going to cover roughly 40 to 70% of just the hospital cost. Now, it can be significant, and it can take quite a bit off your bill. It's going to be used for both public and private hospitals to reduce your hospitalization cost. It runs about $10 a month for Filipinos. Very, very reasonable. I think there's a small upcharge for foreigners, but not very much. A lot of my expat friends have PhilHealth, and then if they are in the hospital for a week or 10 days, it can save them about 30% of the total bill for the procedure that they may have had. And as I explain on page 211 in the book, foreigners can enroll in PhilHealth, and it is a really good strategy, very inexpensive. Another option is private local insurance. And I've talked about this before. I carry a peso plan through Michael Onstad. Here's his Facebook page. You can just look him up and direct message him on Facebook and he'll get right back to you. He's kind of widely known here in the Philippines. He's kind of the guy who sells the peso plans to the expats. I pay roughly $80 a month for a plan that reimburses me up to 1.5 million pesos. Now, any pre-existing conditions are not covered for 1 year, but it does cover accidents. And I've had this policy for over a year, so I'm completely covered. And the plan that I have, direct bills, which I like. You don't have to come out of pocket. So for $80 a month, I have an insurance card that I can give to accredited major hospitals. So you can't just give it to any doctor and get direct billing. But in this case, there are major medical centers around the Philippines who will accept direct billing from Pacific Cross, and it costs me about $80 a month. Now, if you want a semi-private room, it's going to be more like $120 a month at age 68. I chose to take the cheaper plan, and I just decided in that odd year I was in a hospital, I'd come out of pocket to get the private room and just pay cash for the private room directly to the hospital. So private healthcare insurance companies here in the Philippines, in addition to Pacific Cross, there's MaxiCare, Medicard, and IntelliCare. These companies offer specific plans aimed at foreigners living in the Philippines. Now, there are some international healthcare insurance companies you can choose. It's going to be slightly more expensive, and you can look at Cigna Global, Alliance, IMG, Geo Blue. These tend to be more expensive but offer more comprehensive coverage, including evacuation to other countries if needed for treatment. Now, I continue to carry my Medicare insurance, Part B, and A is free in America, and I have a supplemental. Now, when the open enrollment period opens again in the fall and around December, I'm going to change that and probably drop my supplemental and go to an Advantage plan. There are Advantage plans. It's based state by state. In Arizona, there are Advantage plans that have very high deductibles, like $15,000 US, and they will subsidize you back $100 every month. So it's about $176 it's taken out of my Social Security for Medicare Part B. If I change later this year, I can get $100 of that $176 back. And then I'm paying $232 for an amazing supplemental plan. I can go to the Mayo Clinic, I can go in Boston, or don't have to just be in Arizona. And if I discontinue that and substitute the Advantage plan, I'll get back $100 of the $176, save the $232, and probably drop the prescription plan I have, which is another $60 or $70. So altogether, I'm paying about $500 US a month. It's $80 here in the Philippines with Michael Onstead Pacific Cross. The rest of it is just worst case scenario situation where if I come up with some bizarre disease, I can go back to America and go to the Mayo Clinic or anybody I want. But after living here now 2 years continuously, I don't see long-term that I'm going to keep that, and I plan to change it in November. Now, travel insurance is something I highly recommend. Now, I've always used Safety Wing. It used to cost me about $5 a day at age 65, 66. As you get older, it's going to be slightly more expensive, and when you get to be like 72, 73, you may not be able to get it. One of the things I like about the Pacific Cross plan that I have is they guarantee you they'll continue to cover you up to like age 104. It's amazing. So you have that. If you keep your policy in place, they will guarantee your coverage through like age 100. But some of these travel plans, they're not available after 73, 74. And even now, you can't go zip lining, you can't go jet skiing, you can't do certain adventure sports, bungee jumping. These adventure, whitewater rafting, they're exclusions. Now, a lot of guys that I consult with are veterans, and there are veteran facilities here in the Manila area. And if you have a service-related illness, those will be covered free of charge by the VA. And I have a friend who just went and did a lot of work and had checkups done, and he's just raving about the quality. And he's familiar with the VA in America, and he just got done having all sorts of services and tests done. And what he tells me is if the VA doesn't have the expertise, or it doesn't have the testing, or it doesn't have the doctor, they will send you to St. Luke's or one of the other first-class hospitals in Manila Manila, and they'll pay for it. So I'm hearing that secondhand, but I believe it to be true. And the VA-approved hospitals in the Manila area are St. Luke's Medical Center, Makati Medical Center, Manila Doctors Hospital, and the Medical City. So let's just talk about what's covered in general by all these medical policies. A lot of people get really confused about what's covered. Local insurance usually covers hospitalization, but often with annual and lifetime limits. Outpatient care may be limited or require additional coverage. Pre-existing conditions are often excluded and have waiting periods, such as my peso plan has a 12-month waiting period for pre-existing conditions. Prescription medication may have limited coverage. My recommendation, as I state on page 213, for most expats is a combination of PhilHealth plus private local insurance like my peso plan from Pacific Cross. Now let's talk about medical and dental benefits. Although only 3% of you stated this was your highest area of regard, we'll rush through this. In chapter 15 of the book, Fly Me to the Philippines, page 103, I have a table and I give you the top 8 most common medical procedures and what they cost in pesos and what they cost in US dollars. For example, an MRI costs typically $100 to $300 versus $1,000 to $3,000 in the United States. A complete physical with lab work, $100 to $200 US dollars versus $500 to $1,000 in the US. Heart bypass surgery, $10,000 to $15,000 versus $70,000 to $200,000 in the US. One of my very good friends had a knee replacement and it cost him $5,000 US dollars. He had some PhilHealth coverage. He told the doctors he was paying cash. He got the price knocked down a little. Another one of my good friends had a titanium hip previously, 5 years earlier, and it needed a little maintenance. He had to have a complete hip replacement. That cost about $12,000 US dollars. He was in and out of the hospital for a week or two because it popped out once before. So about $12,000 US dollars covered that private hospital titanium hip replacement. And both of my friends chose to pay out of pocket. You know, when you get to be like 74, 75 years old, you can have trouble finding insurance. And a lot of expats have a policy where they'll put $200 a month in a savings account. Make sure their Filipino wife or their Filipino girlfriend or one of their expat buddies has access to those funds, or they'll have a credit card. Like our good friend Danny said, his insurance policy is he has an Australian credit card. When he checks into the hospital, he gives him the credit card. If he checks out, he pays the bill. So a lot of people self-fund because these dollar amounts are really small compared to the West. And, you know, people often say you can live here for $1,500 US dollars a month. It's true, you can. You can get an acceptable rental arrangement for $300 or $400 a month. But you do need to have medical insurance, and it could be quite expensive on such a small budget. So a lot of people, if they come here and they have $25,000 US dollars in the bank, that's enough for them to self-insure, and they believe $5,000 to $10,000 is going to cover a heart attack, a knee replacement, 2 weeks in the hospital. It's enough. The costs here are pretty low. Now, one thing I emphasize in the book, here in the Philippines, you just can't walk into the hospital without any cash, without a credit card. You have to at least put a down payment down before you can get in the hospital, and you need to pay your bill before you can get out. So keep that in mind. If you don't have a little cash set aside or a credit card or insurance, you're going to have some difficulty when it comes to medical care. But as you know, I just had dengue 3 weeks ago, and now it's a little bit more top of mind. I'm 68. I'm married to Chrissy, who's going to turn 32 next week. Wish her everybody a happy birthday in the comments section, my beautiful Filipino wife who's usually here with me. Healthcare costs are a fraction of Western costs. That's one of the great appeals of coming here. Not only is the cost of housing, living in an amazing canyon like this, so much cheaper than in America or California, but the medical costs are so much cheaper. Just dental expenses, checkups, lab work, so inexpensive and can easily be done out of cash flow. It's the major emergencies I want you prepared for. If you're interested in a private consultation, you can go here in the description box or in the comment box. I'll have a comment pinned. It'll have a link to Chrissy and my consultation calendar. We offer Big Brother consulting. You don't have a You don't need to have a list of 20 questions ready for me. I'm going to treat you like my little brother, and you'll have both Chrissy and I available to guide you through your Philippine journey. Visit Amazon, pick up a paperback copy of the book. A lot of this information you can find in the travel guide. Chapter 24 has 10 testimonials of people who've used our consulting service and Chrissy's social media investigation services. Take care of your health. Till next time, Chrissy will be back from Fly Me to the Philippines. Stay safe.